Good news can often get overlooked or buried by the negative in our everyday lives, so let's change that. I'm Adrianna.
And I'm Wyatt.
We're just two ordinary people without any special qualifications or anything, trying to navigate life. We invite you to join us as we share wholesome stories, news articles of hope, and ideas about how we can all make the world just a little bit brighter. We are uplifting positive stories. Welcome back to another episode of Uplifting Positive Stories. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, happy to be here again after we just kind of had an extended long weekend, which is kind of nice to have in the middle of
nice.
Summer, our busy season.
Yes, we've been working a lot lately, so having a little weekend reprieve to just kind of get some R&R was very, very nice. But we are back at it.
Mm-hmm.
Today's episode is going to be a little more unique than our past episodes in that it's kind of a medley of stories of various topics. Most of our episodes have a general theme. This one, the theme overall is just faith in humanity, and these are all just very unique, different stories that are actually pretty commonplace things that happen in our everyday lives that we might not know are happening or we might just see and forget about. But they happen so often, and I think it's great to give them a bit of a spotlight and acknowledge that these things are happening. For example, when you're going through a drive-thru and someone in front of you pays for your meal, or you see someone give some money to someone that's on the street asking for help. Things like that we see or maybe even don't see that are happening every day in our world that we just don't know about. So I'm kind of going to try to give a little spotlight to that. I found some stories that feature things of that nature and maybe have a little extra something to them that just kind of spark the feels that I think are really sweet.
Yeah, I feel we could all use a little bit more faith in humanity sometimes, Hopefully we, generally speaking, have that, but I feel like some days are harder than others to see the faith.
It's just crazy to me going through all these Reddit threads and just how many stories there are of people being so surprised when someone pays for their groceries or so surprised when someone pays for their McDonald's meal or whatever it is. And so I just think it's cool to be able to spotlight them. So going forward with that, we will start with our first Reddit story, which comes from What's the Most Wholesome Experience You've Had? This story says, I was put out of work for a month due to surgery. I was at the grocery store trying to get the most basic things that my daughter needed. My card was declined. I was embarrassed and upset that I couldn't even provide for my daughter. I apologized profusely to the cashier, started crying, picked up my daughter, and tried to leave. The guy in line behind me stopped me and said, let's get that baby some food. Got out of line, took my basket, had me walk with him through the store to get more stuff, and paid for it. I thanked him at least 100 times. I think about that man often.
Wow, that's so nice,
I mean, not only just to pay for her stuff that she already had and had her card declined for, but then to also be like, let's walk around the store and get more things that you need to set you up even better than what you were going to get before. Mm-hmm. That just struck me because, you hear stories of people paying for people's groceries and stuff, which is incredibly nice to begin with. Like, that's such a nice gesture. But this extra little step that he took to really set her up because it was clear that she was struggling is just, I just was blown away by it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, not only is that, extra money to take her through the store and get more goods for her and her family, but it's also just taking more time as well. Like,
right.
That's very active, like versus like not trying to take away from the generosity of just paying for someone's groceries in front of you, but if you have the money, then that's relatively easy for you to do versus like now you're taking the extra step of actively now, maybe he was in a hurry or something, or like that's just more time he's have to take out of his day along with forking forward extra money. Like, again, not taking away from like the act of just paying for her in general, the goods she already had, but it's just it takes an extra step further. And I'd say good on her as well for allowing, I'm sure maybe she was in need, but to let the ego go a little bit, because I feel like a lot of us, it's pretty, and we're guilty of this as well.
Yes.
When someone offers us something, we're like, oh no, we're good. Like we don't want to like put anyone out, like we're sometimes struggle with accepting generosity, and like for her to like let that part go, to like accept not only the assistance, but then to go the extra step further to walk the store, see what else she could use. Like that's big too.
Yeah, that is. It's a very sweet story all around. I've got a lot of these stories, so we're going to go into the next one here. This next one is also from the Reddit thread, What's the Most Wholesome Experience You've Had? And this one says, One time, while visiting a friend in Chicago, I gave a downtrodden, homeless man $20 for food, etc., as he had explained to me he lost his house and his job and just wanted a way out or a way up. About 6 weeks later, I was visiting again, and the man spotted me, told me he used that $20 for food, deodorant, and hygiene products, and while buying said products, he was offered a room at a nearby hostel. During the 6 weeks I was gone, he got a job, found housing, and was on the way up, and gave me a huge hug and said none of it would have happened if it weren't for my willingness to give a kind ear and a few dollars. Really filled my heart with joy and tears in my eyes. To this day, I do my best to give what I can and lend an ear when the opportunity presents itself. Let's not give up on each other. Loving kindness will always prevail.
That's really nice. It's always good to as well when you hear it come back around and know that it actually benefits someone, because you never know how that money is going to be used, especially when you just give cash.
Right.
So to see that actually did have a positive impact is always great to hear.
Yeah. The fact that he was able to get a job and housing and kind of pull himself out of where he was. And it's cool too in this situation to hear it wasn't just the money, but also just the kind ear. It's clear that this person must have stopped and talked with him about it for a decent amount of time. And so to see that also made such an impact as well. Because, $20 is a lot for someone that doesn't have anything. But, I mean, it's $20. It's not a huge amount. But I'm sure that extra, like you said before, that extra time of standing and speaking with him, that he could have just given the money, which is still a big act, and walked away. But to also give that time and that effort to listen, I think is just a really extra little something that I thought was really, really sweet. Our next story also comes from the same thread, and this one is another story of someone helping out at a store. This one really struck me emotionally. It's very, very, very cool. Trigger warning for this next story, it does touch on the topics of post-pregnancy complications as well as the loss of a partner. It doesn't go into many details on either of those topics, but if anyone would prefer to skip, I will put the time codes in the description below for this story. The story says, I had just had a C-section and my incision abscessed. I was at the pharmacy with my 2-week-old baby waiting for my meds to be filled. I had been waiting for an hour. I was exhausted, sick, emotional, and trying to learn to be a mom all by myself. They finally had the meds ready and told me the total would be $348. I did not have that to spare, and I went back to the bench and just started bawling. I didn't know what to do. A gentleman who was also waiting had watched and heard everything. He asked what was wrong, and I just unloaded everything on this poor stranger. Everything. I left the pharmacy and took my baby home. A half hour later, the pharmacy called and said I could get my meds because someone had paid for them. I knew that it had been the man at the pharmacy. I went and picked up the prescriptions, and in the bag there was a gift card for gas, a gift card for Target, and an Amazon gift card. There was a note that said, "It will be okay." About a year later, when things were going well, I happened to run into that man at the same pharmacy. I recognized him right away because I had been looking for him ever since the day he saved me. I asked if he remembered me, and he just smiled. I told him that his kindness had likely saved my life that day, and that I wish I had a way to thank him. I showed him the note that I had carried in my wallet since that bad day. He then told me that the day we had met, he had just lost his wife.
Oh, geez.
And that when he saw me crying, he heard his wife's voice say, "Help her," and he knew he had to. I still see him sometimes, and we always hug and talk.
Oh my gosh. That is an emotional roller coaster. Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow. Take away the kind act. That's already an emotional. Jeez. That's got layers of emotion to it.
Yeah. There's so many levels to this story. In a past episode, we talked about taking something negative that happens in your life and really hard and making something positive from it, and having his wife's loss and then doing something super nice for this lady and helping her so greatly. I mean, not only did he pay for her medications, but then he also gave her gas card, a Target card, Amazon gift card. Like, for a new mother, I can't even imagine when you're struggling how much of a difference that would make for you, just to be able to get you back on your feet and kind of help you out in that situation. And yeah, wow. And again, just like the past story, how it's not often you get to see the aftermath of your kind deed. And so for this man to know that this made such an impact on her, and for her to remember his face and be like, "Do you remember me? Because I remember you and you did this for me." And it was it saved my life, really. And so to have that moment between the two of them, I just think is so incredible.
Mm-hmm. And especially because it sounds like, it sounds like she's a single mom, and like to have to deal with all that by herself, and to have anyone help out at all, and he doesn't know her life story. He just knows that she's in a bad place,
Right.
And I just can't imagine even thinking of trying to do anything for others while you're on probably the worst day of his life. Like I could get if it was like a week after, but the day of, oof.
Yeah, right.
That's so tragic.
Yeah.
And could I just say, like, it just sucks that obviously the theme of the episode is faith in humanity, but it sucks that like there's the complete lack of faith in our healthcare system and the cost of prescription drugs and medication and healthcare, and it's just sad. So it's great to see when people then step up to help each other when they can. It's just sad that we have to.
Which that kind of leads into our next story. Again, from the same thread. This one says, I have been diagnosed with PTSD, depression, and anxiety, and I was at the pharmacy trying to get my meds filled, but my card kept declining. A couple of the meds have major side effects if I skip a dose, so I really couldn't go without them. I was frantic and trying to figure out what was wrong with my card when another lady smiled and swiped her card for me so I could get my medication filled.
Mm-hmm. That's scary, the situation to be in, because like...
Major side effects if you skip a dose.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the fact that people are stepping up. And like I said, these are just 2 stories involving, pharmacy medication, someone stepping up to do it. There were so many more that I have read just in this thread alone. And there are so many threads that I look through that also have these stories. But there are so many stories of this. And how often do you see that happen? I mean, we're kind of so blinders up, I guess, as we're going through our day-to-day that we don't really notice when those things happen. Most of the times it's usually pretty discreet anyways. You don't really know if that person knows them or something when they swipe their card. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So how often is this really happening and people stepping up and helping people out? And it means so much to them, but we don't really hear about it, because they're not usually proclaiming it to the world that this happened, except for maybe on places like Reddit or social media for the people that they know. I just think it's really cool to be able to see these stories and know that there are good people out there that are restoring our faith in humanity little by little,
Yeah.
Our next story comes from the same thread. As you can tell, I'm a big fan of this thread.
It's a theme.
It's a theme. This story says, didn't happen to me, but one time my friend was going home from a class at university, and as she was going to her car in the street, a homeless man came up to her and gave her the keys, asking if they were hers. Turns out she threw them in the trash with a used tissue that morning and went to class without realizing.
Oh no.
The man walked by and stopped to scavenge the trash pile and found the keys. He then started clicking the button to see if one of the cars nearby turned on. When hers did, he concluded that it probably was from a student since that street was so close to the campus. So he went to the security guard at the gates to hand him the keys, but the guard didn't want to take them since he didn't know for sure whose they were. The homeless man just waited for hours until the owner of the car showed up to return them. He said he came by around 8 o'clock and our classes ended around 1. We usually hang out and chat for a bit before leaving. My friend was really moved by what he did and tried to give him money, but he wouldn't accept it. He said it was because he believed there is still good people out there. She insisted on helping him in some way, and then he asked her to go to a pet store nearby and buy food for his dog. She bought the dog food and a chocolate bar for him. Later, she checked the stuff she had in her car in the trunk, and all was there untouched. I was really shocked when she told me that story because he could have easily stolen the car, but he didn't. Not only did he not steal the car, but he waited for her all day on the street to return the keys. It takes a really pure soul to be a person who has nothing and still worry about a rich girl losing her car keys.
Wow. I mean, I feel like many people have experienced, like, dropping something out of their pocket and someone noticing, hey, you dropped this, and then pick it up and hand it to you. Like, I've experienced that personally, but to go that far of like waiting hours and hours to even witness the thing happen, just this deductive investigation of sorts to figure out like what's going on with these keys, who they belong to, and just waited for them. Like, that's a whole other level of
just
kindness, No one would be expected to ever do that.
Yeah. And then also, like, she offered to, give him something in return as a thank you. And he at first was declining. I mean, this is someone that's homeless. This person didn't really have anything. Eventually, he was like, okay, well, you could get me some food for my dog, I guess. That would be helpful. But just the fact that he did that just out of the goodness of his heart and wasn't expecting anything in return. And yeah, wow. Just wow. Mm-hmm.
And even when he did accept something, it was for his dog, not even for himself.
Right. I know. It's just the feels, all the feels. It's such a cute story. So our news article today is titled, Vancouver looks to expand free downtown east side Wi-Fi to help homeless population connect. It's from the Vancouver Sun. Basically, the Vancouver City Council was proposing to expand their Wi-Fi to be offered in the downtown area for free, hoping that could help homeless people be able to reach resources that could help them more easily. Because there are so many resources out there, but a lot of them don't know they exist because there's no way to actually get that information to them besides like flyers and things like that. But that's not always going to be the most helpful way of giving out that information. To quote the article, it says, if services such as the city's shelter hotline or drug toxicity alerts exist, but they aren't getting to people because of the lack of access to cellular or Wi-Fi services, then they aren't serving their purpose. The article also mentions how a lot of times finding jobs is usually an online process now. There's a lot more job postings on places like Indeed or Glassdoor or places like that. So a lot of times the library is filled with people trying to access their internet in there, to try to find jobs. And so this would be another way for them to be able to access job postings more easily wherever they are. So they don't all have to go to the library to do it. I just thought this was such a cool idea and such an interesting way of trying to bridge that gap between people being able to find resources they need.
Mm-hmm. It always surprised me to think that I don't imagine homeless people having phones or having access to internet through that kind of device, but a lot of them do.
Yeah.
Granted, they're probably old and don't necessarily work amazingly, but it's another tool for them. Also, we don't know everyone's life story of where they came from to end up homeless,
Right.
And so, offering anything to help people be able to get out of that living situation, I think is only a good thing,
Yeah. It's a really, really cool idea. So that was a bit of an older story. As of March 13th on globalnews.ca, there's an article that says that Vancouver Council approves plan to expand free Wi-Fi in downtown east side. So it looks like it was approved, which is really awesome that it went through and that it sounds like they're going to be implementing this in their area. And how cool would that be if that was just a thing worldwide? If each area could provide that resource to people, how much of a difference could that really make,
I mean, that speaks to a larger issue of bandwidth, access to bandwidth in general.
Right.
Because I know lower income areas tend to have lesser strength service Wi-Fi, and that can really make things hard for, again, finding jobs or doing their job, especially now that we've moved into more of an era of working from home as, options. And if you're living in an area where Wi-Fi is not great, that takes away that option for you, or remote learning,
Right.
So, and I'm sure that's partially helped the reason that it passed is that anyone can use the Wi-Fi then. It's not just only benefiting
for sure.
homeless people. Anybody that's in the area could benefit from that.
Yeah, it helps everybody. So I just thought that was a really cool thing and just a good example of making the world a better place and making it easier for people that are struggling to get access to resources and all those things. So just a feel-good article. With that, we will end today's podcast episode. I hope to do more of these kind of intermixed with our themes and stuff, just kind of have the overall theme of faith and humanity with stories like ones we shared today, where it's just random things that happened in public that maybe aren't huge, but are huge to some individual in their lives and what they were dealing with. Mm-hmm. So we have a Facebook group called Uplifting Positive Stories. If you'd like to join it, we'd love to have you. Also, if you have any positive stories you'd like to share, we would love to share them on this podcast. And if you're able to send them to us at upliftingpositivestories@gmail.com, we would love to have them. So thank you so much again for joining today's episode. Tune in next week on Wednesday for a new episode. In that episode, we'll be talking about making other people feel special. There are a bunch of sweet stories in that one that I'm looking forward to sharing. So tune in next week. Thanks so much for joining again and have a great rest of your week.
And stay positive.